On Valentine's Day, I got two surprises related to my husband Gary. One was evidence of his affair with his secretary Jenny. The other was his cancer diagnosis report. 1 second, I was feeling like my world was crashing because Gary was diagnosed with terminal cancer. The next second, I was blindsided by the intimate photos of Gary and Jenny. I was holding Gary's cancer diagnosis in one hand and the intimate photos in the other, deep in thought. Should I cry or should I laugh? My best friend Lily told me, "Nancy, who cares if you cry or laugh? Just wait for Gary to pass, take all the assets, and live your best life." I thought about it, and that really made sense. A cheating husband is like a diamond ring that fell in a cesspool. You might still like it, but it just makes you feel gross inside. I took Lily's advice and called Larry at the bank to ask how much money was in the company account under my and Gary's names. I wanted to know how long I could spend lavishly. To my surprise, Larry told me there was only $2 in the company account. Larry also said, "Ms. Nancy, the loan the company applied for recently is about to be approved." I was stunned. Larry continued, "Ms. Nancy, regarding the mortgage your husband mentioned before, if you want to proceed, bring the property deed over as soon as possible for evaluation." I found out Gary had applied for a $50 million loan under the company's name. He also took out a mortgage on our marital home. It wasn't until now that I realized Gary had already transferred all our marital assets. And he had applied for loans behind my back. Lily was shaking with anger, ready to go after Gary with a cleaver. I quickly stopped her, saying, "Don't ruin your life over this jerk." Lily hugged me with concern, "Nancy, Gary is not only cheating, but he's left you with all this debt." I snickered and patted Lily. "Trying to scam me? Not so easy. Watch and see how I fight back." Gary and I met at a company party. At the time, I was not feeling well and was resting on the balcony. Gary sweetly brought me a cup of hot water and handed me a heating pad. I had a great impression of this thoughtful man then. As we got to know each other, I found we had a lot of similar interests. Not long after, we got together. After we married, I invested all my dowry, and we started a business together. Gary, moved, hugged me and promised to treat me well forever. He seriously talked about recording all shares under my name. He said that way, if anything happened to him, I would be secure for life. Back then, I was happy, thinking I'd found true love. In 3 years, we had established the company in the industry. I thought good days were ahead. Little did I know, he was dreaming of trading up and getting a new wife. That night, when Gary came home from work, he entered a dark room and saw me on the sofa. Impatiently, he asked, "Nancy, why didn't you turn on the lights?" The lights clicked on, and Gary saw my tear-stained face. He was startled and frowned. "What happened to you?" Choking back sobs, I asked, "Gary, are you bankrupt?" Gary's face froze. "The company's doing well, why are you saying this?" Through my tears, I said, "I called Larry at the bank. He said there's no money left in the account and that you've taken a lot of loans." Gary panicked but quickly replied, "The company expanded, so we took some loans, but it's all normal business. Don't worry." With tearful eyes, I looked at Gary. "That's good. Gary, if there's ever an issue with the business, you must tell me. We're in this together." Gary seemed annoyed, but he held it together and said, "Just rest at home and take care of yourself. Leave the company to me." I nodded, said nothing, and watched Gary breathe a sigh of relief from the corner of my eye. Inside, I sneered. If I hadn't found out the truth, I would have been conned by the person closest to me. I shredded Gary's cancer diagnosis and flushed it down the drain. "Gary, I gave you the chance to save yourself, but you didn't take it, so don't blame me." The next day, I took the initiative to meet with Gary's mistress Jenny. I waited at the cafe for half an hour before Jenny showed up. She was polished, wearing a strappy dress, with ambiguous marks on her fair neck. Seeing me, Jenny stroked her neck, smirking, "Nancy, Gary loves me now. If you're smart, you'd leave." I smiled, you think Gary truly loves you? Jenny snorted. Of course, Gary and I are true love. He said he's disgusted seeing you every day. I chuckled. You trust a man's words? Don't you know Gary's assets are with me? Jenny smugly shook her head. That was before. I clenched my sleeve, remaining calm. You think once Gary and I split, you'll be safe forever? Jenny scoffed. Don't try to divide us. By the way, I'm carrying Gary's son. That's my ace. I couldn't help but click my tongue, provoking her. If I don't divorce, he's just a bastard. And you'll always be the shameful mistress. My words visibly hit Jenny's sore spot. Her expression soured, and she grabbed her bag and left. After Jenny left, I called Lily. Hey, can you check if Jenny's accounts recently got some assets? Though I doubted it, from what Jenny said, I suspected Gary transferred assets to her. Lily, working quickly, solved it in 2 hours. It turned out Gary shifted all assets to Jenny's name. I laughed coldly. Gary, transferring everything to someone else? Not sure whether you're clever or just plain dumb. Lily's voice burst with excitement. Nancy, I found out Jenny has a boyfriend back home. I gripped the phone. Really? Lily cheerfully added, what a coincidence. Jenny and her ex worked at my brother Leo's company. They were caught doing shady stuff in the office after hours by the security and got fired by Leo. Last month, Jenny's boyfriend went to Leo's company bragging about how his girlfriend snagged a wealthy man and was going to turn her life around. He even insulted Leo, saying he'd regret not recognizing her worth. And guess what? Jenny brought her ex-boyfriend to work at the company too, but not sure what position he has. I was speechless. These two sure know how to have fun. But this just gives me another card to play. I wonder how Gary will react when he finds out about all this. That evening, I got home to find Gary sitting on the couch with a grim expression. He looked up, annoyed, and said, Nancy, when did you become so petty? Jenny's my secretary, and there's nothing inappropriate going on between us. Why are you giving her a hard time? I smirked to myself. I guess Jenny had complained, and now he was here taking her side. Well, if we're playing the victim, two can play at that game. I put on a hurt expression and said, Gary, maybe Jenny misunderstood. I was just checking up on you because I'm worried about how much stress you're under. Why would I doubt you and Jenny? She has a boyfriend, and I know about that. Gary looked shocked and grabbed me, his face pale. Jenny's got a boyfriend? How'd you know? I pretended not to notice his reaction and teased, you really don't pay much attention to your employees, do you? I heard it from Lily. Funny thing, Jenny and her boyfriend used to work at Lily's brother's company. Her boyfriend was just visiting there, talking about their upcoming wedding. Oh, and by the way, I added with a dry laugh, Jenny's boyfriend mentioned she's pregnant and they're planning on celebrating soon. Gary, do you realize you just accused me of something I didn't do? Gary's face darkened even more, and he forced a smile. I must have misheard or misunderstood. I'm sorry, honey. I scoffed and said casually, we should definitely give them a big wedding gift. Gary put on his jacket, looking like he might explode, and said, I just remembered something urgent back at the office. You eat and sleep without me tonight, okay? I stepped forward, straightening his tie and collar, and said sweetly, Gary, take care and don't overdo it. Gary forced a smile before rushing out. I watched him leave, thinking Jenny's in for a sleepless night. But me? I'll sleep just fine. After Gary left, I grabbed the keys and headed to the office. It was empty, so I went straight to Gary's office. On his desk was evidence of property transfers. I laughed. Gary, did you really think you could fool me? I skimmed the documents, then made my way to the cafe next door. I called Gary's assistant, Max. He soon arrived, looking flustered and sweating. Seeing me, he practically buckled. Before he could speak, I cut to the chase. Max, do you want to go down with them or side with me? Max turned pale, sweat pouring down like rain. I sipped my coffee leisurely. After a bit, he said, "Nancy, what do you need me to do?" I put down my coffee, looked Max in the eye, and said, "I just want what's mine." Max's eyes flickered, then he nodded grimly. "All right." I smirked at him and said, "Smart choice." Leaving the cafe, I drove to the address Jenny had just sent me. A standalone villa, of course. After Gary transferred assets, he sure didn't neglect Jenny. I watched from my car as two figures embraced by the window. Gary pressed his ear against Jenny's belly, both looking overjoyed. Jenny threw me a smug glance from inside. I smiled back. My phone buzzed twice. Jenny texted, taunting me, "Nancy, didn't think you had it in you, but you've lost." Lost? I doubt that. I typed back quickly, "Talk to me when you can openly challenge me without worrying about Gary finding out." Jenny frowned at me, then smirked and drew the curtains, darkening the room. Just then, I got a call from the hospital. "Hello, is this Mr. Gary? We need to ensure you've received your medical report. Your cancer is still treatable at this stage, but any further delays could worsen it." I stayed silent for a moment before hanging up. The hospital is diligent, I'll give them that. But except for thieves, no one really likes a diamond dropped in the mud. I was almost hoping Gary's condition would worsen. I smiled, started the car, and drove off. The next morning, Gary came home looking exhausted. Without a word, he headed for a shower, leaving behind his jacket stained with Jenny's perfume. Jenny sure has her tricks, but she won't be dancing for long. After the shower, Gary went straight to bed. I enjoyed my breakfast, feeling on top of the world. Later, Max texted, "Nancy, everything's set. I've got all the evidence of Gary's asset transfers. Meet at the cafe." Grinning, I picked up my things and went to meet Max at the cafe. The moment I sat down, a familiar perfume hit me. I looked up to see Jenny with Max. Jenny sneered, "Nancy, you're a joke. A housewife like you convincing Max? Please." Max gave Jenny a sycophantic look. "Jenny, my loyalty is with you and Gary." Jenny stared at me disdainfully, brimming with confidence. I chuckled and put my phone on the table. Lily had sent me a video of Jenny and Max getting up to no good in the office. "Did you really think I wouldn't know Max is your boyfriend? I was just waiting for the show. But I'm curious, is the baby Gary's or Max's?" Jenny's face went white as a sheet. "You know everything?" I laughed softly and paused the video. "You two tried to play Gary, but dragging me into it was your mistake. What do you think Gary will do when he sees this video? Will he still think the baby is his?" Max glared at me, threatening, "Ms. Nancy, you'd better not make things difficult. Remember, accidents happen all the time in this world. A perfectly normal person could walk out of their house and get hit by a car. I mean, you can't just stay inside forever, right?" When Jenny heard what Max said, her face went back to normal. "Yeah, Nancy," Jenny continued. "I suggest you keep quiet and just cooperate with us, or else." I looked at the two people in front of me, a smile not reaching my eyes. "All right then, let's see how it goes." I got back home from the coffee shop, figuring Jenny had probably already spilled the beans to Gary. Sure enough, when I walked in, there was Gary sitting on the couch. Seeing me come in, he quickly tried to feel me out. "Honey, I heard from Jenny that you went to the company to see Max." I nodded, full of disappointment as I looked at Gary. "Gary, I can't believe you've been moving our assets behind my back. If it weren't for Jenny telling me, I wouldn't have known you got her pregnant." Desperate, Gary grabbed my hands. "Honey, you've got it all wrong. I have my reasons." I played along. "Then tell me, what's your side of the story?" Gary looked a bit uneasy. "I wouldn't have gone to someone else if you could have a child." I looked at the insincere man in front of me with pity and said softly, "And why can't I have children?" Gary's complaining instantly stopped. When we first started the business, I didn't know I was pregnant and followed Gary around for work. The day we sealed the deal, I lost the baby from the stress. I remember Gary, with red-rimmed eyes, promised while holding me tight, "Nancy, I will always treat you well and never let you down. If I do, may I meet a terrible fate." Remembering this, I couldn't help but let out a small laugh. "Gary, when you plotted to transfer the assets and got loans under my name, did it ever occur to you what I'd do?" Gary gritted his teeth, "But now you know." "So what?" "I'll agree not to divorce you if Jenny gives birth and lets you raise the child." I threw water in his face. "You jerk." Gary wiped his face and sneered, "Max has already destroyed all evidence. You'd better cooperate. Considering you've been with me for years, I won't divorce you. But if you stubbornly insist on it, you won't get anything." I chuckled in anger and turned to him. "How do you know I don't have evidence? You should really thank your mistress. If she hadn't kept sending me photos of you two, I might not have any proof of your affair. As for your asset transfer, I don't have evidence of that, but I do have proof of your embezzlement." I smiled. "Either walk away with nothing, or I go to the cops with proof of your embezzlement and forged signatures. I'm done. By tonight, have an answer for me." With that, I grabbed my bag and left. I might not have proof of the asset transfer, but I did grab a file of forged documents from the company. They were for bags Gary bought for Jenny, funded by company accounts. One was a bag I liked but never bought out of frugality, yet Gary had bought over a dozen for his mistress. When I left home, I went straight to Lily's place. Lily looked at me with empathy. "Nancy, you're amazing. I was worried you'd hold on to this love. You used to love that jerk Gary so much." I nestled on the couch. "I can let go or hold on, depending on whether the person deserves it. Gary didn't contact me, proving he needed a wake-up call. So, I went ahead and hired a lawyer, got an auditor to go through every company record. It wasn't long before we found all of Gary's falsified accounts." Gary glared at me. "Nancy, what gives you the right to do this?" I smiled, "Because I'm the company's sole shareholder and legal representative." Gary's face darkened. "Nancy, I never thought you were so calculated. Do you have to be so heartless?" I chuckled. "Oh, when you don't fall for their schemes, you're calculated. And as for heartlessness, how dare you bring that up?" Gary gritted his teeth. "Let's split the assets evenly." I snorted. "Why should I? I'm not the one who cheated." Gary shouted angrily. "Nancy, I built this company. You're just a housewife. Given you half is good enough, don't push it." I regarded him coldly. "Did you forget the seed money for the company came from me? And that early clients were all brought in by me?" Gary's expression was unreadable as he stared at me, while the company lobby fell silent. You could only hear the shuffling of papers from the accountant. I laid down the ultimatum. I want a decision by the end of the day. Just then, Jenny and Max appeared. Jenny rushed toward me. "Nancy, you want to escalate this?" I looked at her face, oddly splotched with lipstick, and winked. "I left you some dignity. Haven't ripped it all away yet." Then I glanced at Max, whose tie was still crooked. Jenny's eyes narrowed as she gritted her teeth at me. "You both have 2 hours, I said calmly. Jenny glared daggers at me. Gary, meanwhile, begged, "Nancy, don't be so cruel to me." I looked down at Gary. "You were first, remember?" In the end, caught between a rock and a hard place, Gary and Jenny had to transfer all assets to me to avoid jail time, including the villa where they had their little date night. I, along with my lawyer, drew up the divorce papers, stating Gary voluntarily gave up everything and would leave with nothing. Gary looked livid but, aware of the evidence I held, begrudgingly signed. As he tossed the pen onto the table, he gave me a strange smile. "Nancy, you're ruthless. But you think as a housewife, even if I handed everything over, you could keep it?" I smiled back. "Let's meet at the registry at 8 a.m. tomorrow." Gary snorted, leaving with Jenny in tow. Max, lingering last, looked at me with a knowing smile. "Remember what I said, Nancy?" I shot back, "Max, I haven't shown those videos of you and Jenny to Gary yet." Max grinned, flashing his white teeth. The next morning, I got ready early, preparing to head to the registry. Halfway there, at a secluded intersection, someone rear-ended me. As I was about to get out to check, chills ran down my spine. I suddenly recalled Max's grin. From my rear view, I saw the person from the other car, hat and mask on, approaching my door, just a whisper away from grabbing the door handle. I suddenly felt super calm and floored the gas pedal. Seeing my car take off, he hurriedly ran a few steps. In the rear view mirror, I could clearly see the knife tucked in his waistband. On the road, I decided to call the cops and headed to the nearest station. Sure enough, when the cops arrived, they said there was no one at that intersection. After checking the surveillance and catching the license plate, they realized it was a stolen plate. A police officer handed me a cup of hot water. Good thing you didn't stop. Otherwise, you'd probably be in trouble. My heart was racing. I told the cops about Max's situation. Comparing his build, they pretty much confirmed it was him. Soon, the police found Max and arrested him. After dealing with all that, I went straight to the Civil Affairs Bureau. Gary and Jenny saw me there looking perfectly fine, and their faces went pale. I looked at them coldly. Sorry, got delayed by a bad guy on the way, but luckily the cops have caught the suspect. Gary and Jenny exchanged glances. Reluctantly, they finalized the divorce with me. Walking out of the bureau, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Gary had a dark look in his eyes, while Jenny grinned wickedly, blocking my path. Gary's so talented. He'll earn us a fortune again for sure. I shrugged lightly. Yeah, sure. Hope you guys get rich again. But who knows if Gary can live that long. After leaving, Gary started a new company. He poached the clients and a good chunk of the talent from his old company. Honestly, he played right into my hands. I smirked and instructed my assistant to compete for projects against Gary, no matter the cost. Gary, unprepared for my mutual destructive strategies, lost 2 projects in a row. Desperate to save face, Gary threw everything into competing for a prime new project. He even sold Jenny's house just to give it his all, hoping to crush me. We went back and forth in a price war, with him going low and me going lower. My assistant looked at me worried. Manager Nancy, the current bid will not only lose us money, but it'll cost us 30%. Are you sure you want to lower the bid? I skimmed through the past bids, asked around about Gary's situation, and decisively pulled out of the bidding at the last moment. Gary predictably snagged a bad deal. I knew since the audit day that the company was stripped bare by Gary. I might have been a stay-at-home mom for 2 years, but I didn't spend my days unproductive. Oh, Gary, you really did underestimate me. Even if Gary couldn't win the bid, he wanted to mess with me. Little did he know, I'd outsmart him. But in the end, he had to default on the project because it was such a loss. He got blacklisted by a lot of industry big shots. As soon as I heard this, the hospital called. An oncologist warned over the phone, Ms. Nancy, your husband's test results are concerning. It's best to start treatment soon to increase survival chances. Feigning surprise, I said, so Gary has cancer? The doctor sounded taken aback. Yes, didn't you know? I saw someone picked up the report. Choking back fake tears, I said, picked up the report but didn't have the chance to read it before finding out about Gary's affair. We got divorced so his illegitimate kid could have a place. The doctor gasped on the other end. I wiped non-existent tears and said, Doctor, maybe you should just contact Gary directly. In the spirit of adding insult to injury, I kindly passed along Gary's contact info to the doctor. I was at home having a leisurely face mask session when Gary called. Nancy, you cruel witch. He screamed. I chuckled from my massage chair. You think that's cruel? I could be harsher if you want. Gary was momentarily stunned, then he dryly said, I won't hold a grudge even though you got me blacklisted. But all my money is tied up in other projects, and I need 500 grand to pay for treatment. I spread my hands helplessly. I have lots of 500 grands, but honestly, I'd rather throw them in the river than give them to you. I thoughtfully reminded him, oh, by the way, the doctor said you should start treatment soon. Might still be a slim chance. Gary breathed heavily. Nancy, are you really going to just sit back and watch me die? I disdainfully cleared my ear, hung up, and promptly blocked his number. One day, I was napping at home when my bestie called frantically over and over. Lily exclaimed, Nancy, quick, look. Gary's doing a live stream accusing you. Suddenly wide awake, I grabbed my phone and tuned in. There was Gary, looking sickly yellow on a hospital bed, responding to chat comments. I have cancer, he lamented. Getting divorced makes sense. Who'd want a burden like me? All the assets, I left them to Nancy when we divorced. All these years of hard work were for her. My only wish is for her to be happy. Then I'll be content. Watching him perform, I had to admit, the man was a master at twisting the truth. Lily scoffed on the phone. How can he lie like that? The peanut gallery has him convincing them you're a heartless woman who abandoned her sick husband and ran off with the money. I reassured my friend, don't worry. We're just getting started. Let him say what he wants, it's all a big joke. Remember, the one scrambling is Gary, not me. Infuriated, my friend said, I just can't stand him making stuff up, making it sound like you're at fault when you're the victim here. I calmed her down, collected my evidence, and headed to the hospital to confront him live. Gary was still streaming when I arrived. Seeing me, a smug grin crept across his face. He choked up for the crowd, Nancy, you're here. Still looking dazzling, unlike me who's on death's door. Under Gary's manipulation, the chat was all about bashing the ex-wife. I clapped my hands, your acting has truly improved, Gary. If I weren't a part of this, I might find the story touching. Opening my drafts, I hit send, then addressed the live stream camera. I've posted the truth and all evidence on my profile. Please go there to check it out before you comment. Gary, panicking, interrupted, Nancy, must you be so heartless? I stared him down, otherwise, what? Watch you twist the truth and profit off my misery? Quickly, people started migrating to my account. Soon enough, the sentiment in the chat shifted. Jenny, who'd been hiding quietly on the balcony, came rushing out, weeping innocently. What did we do wrong? It was just love, that's all. I laughed so hard my stomach hurt. Love? Then let me ask you, Miss Jenny, does your form of a true love involve being with Gary while also dating Max? You're really not missing out on either side. I glanced over at Gary, who looked like a storm cloud ready to burst, and handed him my phone with the video playing. After all, you've been married, you should know if you're raising someone else's kid. Gary watched the video, breathing heavily with anger, pointing at Jenny. I can't believe you cheated on me. Jenny quickly tried to explain, Gary, don't trust Nancy. The baby is really yours. Gary was so angry his lips were trembling, with a weird flush on his face. Jenny kept insisting, Gary, believe me. It was just a mistake with Max. But I swear, the baby is yours. Gary, in a fit of rage, jumped off the bed and tried to grab Jenny, but she shoved him hard. He fell to the ground and even started vomiting blood and fainted. I pressed the emergency button in good faith, and doctors and nurses rushed in. Jenny kept defending herself. He attacked me. I was just defending myself, it's not my fault. They had security escort her out. I kindly called the cops for Gary. The doctors struggled to save him, but Gary was too weak and didn't make it. When they came out of the OR, the doctor gave me a complicated look and patted my shoulder. Gary wants to see you. I didn't want to go, but for some reason, I decided to take a look. Thinking back, maybe it was to get some satisfaction. After all, karma was hitting the jerk, and who wouldn't enjoy that? I went to see Gary one last time. He was hooked up to all sorts of tubes, and the monitor was still beeping away. Looking at his face, once mesmerizing to me, I felt nothing but sighs of relief. As much as I once loved it, now I couldn't stand it. I stood by the bed, and Gary seemed to sense something, weakly opening his eyes. When he saw me, he tried to say something, so I removed his oxygen mask. With ragged breaths, he said, "Nancy, am I dying?" I nodded honestly, yes. Gary gasped in terror, then with effort muttered, "Nancy, I don't want to die. Help me now." I felt perfectly calm and leaned in to whisper in his ear, "No." Gary's eyes widened in disbelief, and I softly said, "Don't worry, I'll make sure you have no funeral, no grave, no one sending you off, no one remembering you. By the way, I knew you were sick all along. That report? It's probably floating down a sewer somewhere. And honestly, I'm here just to see how your story ends. Remember, you said if you ever wronged me, you wouldn't die a good death. Well, it seems you got your wish." Gary was frantically gasping and staring at me. I whispered, "Gary, just go die." He looked at me hazily, then finally closed his eyes unwillingly. The machines went off, and the doctor rushed in and said to me briefly, "My condolences." I felt extraordinarily calm, maybe even a bit pleased. Both Gary's parents were gone. He hadn't changed his will, leaving me as beneficiaries and executor. That day, I called the lawyer, got his death certificate sorted, and handled all his estate. Paid extra to expedite his cremation. Then I took his ashes to the beach and scattered them at sea. After handling everything, I surprisingly felt no hatred. Lily mentioned scattering ashes was therapeutic, and I agreed. It really was. Once Gary's matters were resolved, the police called about Max's case. It was serious, and he'd be sentenced harshly. As for Jenny, the whole thing was live-streamed, so it was an easy case. Though she caused Gary's death, she got bail and probation since she was pregnant. I celebrated by partying hard for months. One day, I was on a date with a handsome guy when I got a call from an unknown number. Jenny's voice came through, "Nancy, let's talk." Curious about her smugness, and having time to kill, I agreed. We met at the hospital. Jenny lay in bed, holding a newborn. I chuckled, realizing her confidence came from this. She proudly showed off the baby. "I've given birth. He's definitely Gary's. Give me his company and assets. This is his son." I smiled. "What makes you think you get anything just because you birthed a child?" Jenny scoffed, "Because he's Gary's. Even a love child can inherit, so Gary's assets are legally his son's." I laughed and said straight up, "Then sue me. Friendly reminder, you'll need an official court-recognized paternity test with Gary's DNA." Looking at the baby, who was a spitting image of Gary, I smirked. "Too bad for you, Gary's all ashes now, and that DNA test. Good luck getting it." Jenny hissed, "Nancy, you bitch, don't think I'll let a few words scare me. The child is Gary's. Either give me the money or I'll sue you." I shrugged, "Go ahead then, file the lawsuit." Jenny glared at me, and I just smiled back. I thought it was over since she couldn't take me to court without a DNA test. But Jenny was ruthless. That night, she took the baby to the hospital roof, threatening to jump. The police called me over, and as I reached the rooftop, Jenny was dramatically saying, "I just want my son's rightful assets. As a single mom without a home, without money, how do I survive?" I know our timing wasn't right, but love doesn't follow rules. We already compensated her. He left without a penny after the divorce. We were about to marry but got delayed by things. I gave birth for Gary, but I can't even go to his resting place. Spectators started blaming me for my heartlessness, asking if I could show mercy. Some even shouted, "True love is innocent." Ignoring their moral coercion, I turned to an older woman defending Jenny. "Ma'am, I hope when your husband betrays you and conspires to ruin you, leaving you in debt, you can show the same mercy and give away your assets." The lady turned red, mumbled, and backed off. Ignoring them, I looked at Jenny. "You're really determined. You think my evidence is for show?" Jenny, clenching her teeth, climbed down from the rooftop and the police escorted her back into the ward. But she screamed, "Gary's child or not, Nancy, you're wrongful taking his money, and you won't die a peaceful death. I returned home and found myself in the headlines again. The other day, someone recorded Jenny jumping off a building and posted it online. The place blew up with people trashing me. So, I put together all the evidence I had and threw it up online to clear things up. I even spent some cash to link it to my last live stream incident. People started digging through my posts and figured out all the shady stuff Jenny had done. Before I knew it, I was trending. I seized the moment and went live overnight. Gained 1 million followers just like that. The folks who now knew the whole story were totally with me, slamming Jenny hard. Some fans even joked in the comments, asking, "Sis, where do you bury the jerk? I'll spit on his grave." I calmly replied, "It's all in the past, let's not dwell on it." They praised me for being mature, and I just smiled. Jenny tried going live a couple of times too, but her streams got reported and shut down pretty quick. She even asked me, bossing me around to post a video clearing her name. I just ignored her. Later, she toned it down, begging me through tears to stop letting my fans report her account. She complained about not being able to make money and how her kid didn't even have formula. Still, I paid her no mind, it wasn't my problem. I spent my days hanging out with cute guys, streaming, and doing whatever I felt like. I actually felt younger. Didn't keep up with Jenny after that. The next time I saw Jenny, it was on a legal news channel. Turns out, she got arrested again during her bail period, this time for child abuse. Her kid was moved to a welfare home by the community. I just shook my head and swiped the video away. The next one was some dude doing an awesome transformation. That's my type. I shot him a DM saying, "Hey, wanna chat?" He replied instantly, "Sure thing." I grinned wide, "Yep, scored another cutie."